Hi, and welcome to our Fast Track class, Overcoming Your Fear of Failure. When you hear the word failure, does it conjure up negative thoughts? Does the fear of failure prevent you from stepping outside of your comfort zone? If so, you're not alone. The idea of failing at something and facing potential criticism from others can be completely crippling. But what if I told you that you don't have to fear failure anymore? In fact, you can transform your own life starting today if you just change your mindset on failure. I'm Allie Kramer, and I'll be leading this class today. My background is based heavily in helping others be the very best versions of themselves. And one thing I've learned over the past 15 years is that mindset is key to pretty much everything. And for years, I've been helping people improve their own mindset to work for them rather than against them. One common thing that many people struggle with is having a fear of failure. And this is caused by a variety of reasons and is usually as individual as the person themselves. We all have different mindsets when it comes to this, what failure is. For example, a failure to one person might be a helpful learning experience to someone else. And even though many of us are afraid of failing, this fear can actually stop us from doing the things that help us make progress to reach our goals. And it can be totally paralyzing. Again, fear of failure can stem from various places: humiliating experiences in childhood, or traumatic events, or even simply having a lot of negative self-talk. But it doesn't have to be a lifelong struggle. In today's class, I'll be sharing a key way to overcome this fear and start embracing the idea of failure so you can reach your most sought-after goals. At the end of the class, I'll be answering any questions you may have about this technique, and I'm also going to include a helpful worksheet to help you better process these ideas. So please stick around for that. It's going to be available at the end of the class. I'll share a link for you, and you'll be able to access it. And in the meantime, if you can think of any questions, if anything pops up as I'm talking, please add it to the comments so I can address it at the end. So let's get started on what is fear. Fear is self-created, and it's all about what might happen, not what will happen, right? So most fear itself is rooted in our own thought process. It's the anticipation of events that might happen, which is really just one way of using our imagination, right? We imagine something bad to happen, and therefore we fear it. It's a lot like when we were kids and maybe feared monsters under our bed, or being afraid of the dark because something terrible might be lurking there. Kids are really great at using their imagination. So if fear is simply a product of our imagination, then we simply need to tap into our inner child and imagine something else. This is something we teach a lot at Lifehack. Again, that mindset is key to just about everything, and there's no difference with this. Here, what I'm suggesting you do is not new or a novel approach. Rather, it's pretty much anyone. You can think of anyone that's successful out there in the world, and they probably utilize a type of this method. They've tapped into the power of imagination, which can really make or break you. And the method I'm going to teach you today is really quite simple, not necessarily easy to implement, but with a lot of practice, it gets a lot easier, but it's also very powerful. And for this to work, you really have to believe in it. So you kind of have to, again, tap into your inner child and believe in your own imagination. And again, you're going to have to do this a lot. Practice it and do it over and over again until you really believe it works. And I'm telling you, if you practice this every night, you're gonna see results. There's no doubt about it. So when you tap into your inner child and let your imagination take over, do it until you believe it's real. Really be like that child that thinks the monster in the closet is real or whatever, but channel it towards positive things, right? Belief is an incredibly powerful tool to have in your arsenal, and just as you can believe that something negative will happen, causing the fear of failure, you can just as easily believe that something wonderful will happen. So let me dive into how this works. Again, I'm going to include a worksheet at the end, so if you want to take notes on this, great, but everything is available on the worksheet as well. So I'm going to go over some questions, jot them down if you feel like it, or just take a time and listen. And then you can access the questions on the worksheet at the end. So let's go to the method, right? Maybe by now, a few of you are already thinking that everything I've said is really out there. but please hear me out. Tapping into your imagination to overcome fear is essentially a method of visualization. And numerous studies show that this is a solid way to make things actually happen in your life. Studies on the brain reveal that thoughts produce the same mental instructions as actions. So think about that. That's really powerful. And many athletes use these methods to become top in their sport, and you can use it too to help you overcome any fear that may be taking up space in your own imagination. So here's how we do it. And first I want to mention that this exercise is really best done at night, like right before you go to sleep. Make sure that you've done your whole bedtime routine and you're ready to go to sleep. And so what works with this and why this works better is that you can take your positive imagination thoughts and have that state as you go into sleep. And this is going to help your subconscious process these positive thoughts while your mind is in an actively rested state overnight. So maybe some of you go to sleep anxious. I used to have this problem when I was younger. I would go to sleep and I would have all these horrible thoughts pouring into my head. And then I would have nightmares. So it's kind of this same principle that takes effect here. If you think about these positive thoughts, you use your imagination in a positive way before you go to bed, you'll be surprised at how your dreams even shift. So what you need to do is, before you start this process, right before you go to sleep, is start with a pen and pencil and a couple sheets of paper. You can keep a journal to kind of log your fear process over time, which is very helpful as well. Or you can use the worksheet download at the end of this class. The paper doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs enough room for you to answer a few questions. And then write down the questions and then answer them one by one. And the key here is to really tap into your imagination regarding both your fears and your desired outcome, right? So, okay, let's start with the questions. Number one, you're going to ask yourself, what do I want to achieve? And this is likely where the fear is coming in, right? You know what you want to achieve, but that fear, it won't stop. So then number two, you got to answer that. How could I potentially fail, right? And then number three is where you kind of start to shift. It's how can I crush this fear and replace it with something very positive, the very positive outcome that I'd love to have happen so I succeed instead of fail. And so this is where we're getting into your imagination. You're going to start imagining replacing the fear with something positive, a positive outcome, right? And then you're gonna answer the question, what will the positive outcome be? Okay? So you're going to really describe the positive outcome. And then the next question, number 5, is what will it look like when it does happen? So again, really tapping into your imagination here, using the power of visualization to put yourself in this place of success. Don't let yourself kind of dwell in the idea of failure here. You really want to show yourself and to write down what it looks like when you succeed, okay? And then the last question is, how will I feel when I succeed? And this is a critical point because I'm guessing if you have a fear of anything happening, say you want to ask your boss for a raise and you're like, oh, I have this idea of how it's going to turn out and that makes me feel bad, right? That doesn't make me feel good. I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. I feel like I should have done better. Get rid of all those. Number 6, you're going to ask, how will I feel when I succeed? So say you're asking your boss for a raise and you imagine the scenario to be, oh my gosh, yes, you're doing such a great job. Absolutely. We've been thinking about giving you a raise. Let's talk about it. So how will you feel at that moment? You're likely going to feel relieved, but mostly proud and grateful for the opportunity and really confident in your actions, right? So again, once you have these questions answered and written down, it's time for step 2. So you're going to take the questions that you answered for step number 4, 5, and 6. So those questions are, what will the positive outcome be? Number 5 is, what will it look like when it does happen? And number 6, how will I feel when I succeed? Okay? So take the questions 4, 5, and 6, the answers you've written down, and read them over and over again until they really stick with you. And then now's the time to get comfortable in your bed. So again, you're going to do this before sleeping. So if you're lying in bed, please lie in whatever position you're most comfortable in, on your back, on your side, whatever, on your belly, whatever makes you feel most at rest and most at ease. And then you're going to call to mind the positive, successful scenario that you painted in the questions of 4, 5, and 6. Again, how will it look around you? How will you feel? What is actually happening? Imagine that situation. Really vividly imagine it. And then what I want you to do is imagine that it's already happened. So use your imagination and kind of pretend that, using the example before, you already got a promotion, right? Your boss already recognized your efforts and you have already got a promotion. So that feeling is done. It's accomplished. And you want to imagine that the scenario has already taken place and that you have succeeded at what you want. Again, it's already happened. It's done. And then I want you to imagine every single detail you can think of and put yourself right there. The exact location, how everything feels around you. Imagine what you're wearing, what the air feels like, whether you're indoors, whether you're outdoors, who else is around you, the sounds that you hear. And really paint yourself a vivid picture of this experience. And as you're rested peacefully, allow your imagination to just take over. Let it think about numbers 4, 5, and 6, right? The answers to those questions. And visualize how you will look, how you will feel, how others will react to your success. And then visualize that it all has already happened. And then I want you to stay in this imaginative, positive state as long as you possibly can before you fall asleep. And of course, our minds wander a lot while we sleep, right? So if you slip out of the imaginative state and start kind of hearing the voices of fear come out, that's okay. Just come right back to the positive visualization, the imagined success that you have already achieved. And if you do this over and over again in your mind until you fall asleep, it's really going to make a huge impact. And I want you to say to yourself, I have no fears. Everything has already worked out the exact way I want it to. And that's really it. It sounds super, super simple, right? But think about this. If you're prone to a fear of failure, chances are you're thinking about that failure a lot. It's taking up a lot of space in your imagination. So I don't know if you guys had joined me for the last class on positive thinking. It's a lot like that. You want to replace your negative thinking, your fearful thinking, with something positive and successful. Right? So don't let that fear have any more space in your head. Replace it with something positive. Replace it with the imagined success that you already have. And so you're going to repeat this every single night. And as you do, notice if the fear keeps cropping up in your imagination. If it does, go back to your success and visualize as though it's already occurred. Don't let your imagination spend any more time on that potential failure. It's simply not worth it. Bring it back to you having already achieved success. And repeat to yourself, I have nothing to fear, that it is done, that I have succeeded, right? And really, really believe that fear to be squashed and what you visualize has already happened. So let me give you an example. I'm going to use myself here. So I used to have a fear of failure. And one of my biggest fears was around the time when I had to start doing a lot of public speaking. It was all the way back in 2013, but I was very new to this method of delivering communication, right? And I was terrified of the fear of failure and messing up whatever I would be talking about and leave looking pretty much like a fool. So at the time, nothing seemed more mortifying to me than flopping flat on my face in front of hundreds of people or potentially thousands when the internet's involved. And it really messed with my head. But I knew that if I could psych myself out about it enough, then I'd do better if I sat in my fear, right? So, because if I just sit in my fear, it's just going to make me feel like a mess and freak me out and keep my mind occupied on that fear. It's all negative. I didn't need that, and I kind of knew that I had to get over this or I wouldn't get paid for my work. So it was really critical for me to conquer this fear. And so, admittedly, I didn't use this exact technique with these questions that we're teaching today, but I did use the second step to really visualize my best case scenario. And I repeated it nightly for days up until my scheduled events. It took probably about 7 or 8 public speaking events before I really nailed it. But I did this a lot before anytime I went on stage in front of people, anytime I had to talk on TV or radio or whatever I was afraid of at the time, I would visualize the best case scenario. Now, at the time, I didn't visualize that it had already happened, but it was enough to get me there. I definitely recommend that when you do your own visualization, Imagine that it has already occurred. Just really imagine that you have already succeeded at whatever it was that you used to have a fear about, okay? So over time, what happened is my fear of failure with public speaking all but vanished. And because the more I practiced this technique, the less fears had a hold on me, right? The less space I gave them, the less attention I gave them, they kind of just went away. And then the space opened up where I could use my imagination for positive things. So let's just pretend I used the questions above, and this is how I would answer them. And maybe even likely did answer them like this to myself at the time. So number one, what do I want to achieve? Well, I want to give an amazing presentation and leave the audience with something of value. So number two, how could I potentially fail? So this actually went through my head a lot. Well, I could blank out in front of everyone and forget what I was supposed to say. I could pass out, I guess, from anxiety. I could get sick while being on stage. Like, I actually thought I might get sick in front of everyone. Or I could trip and fall getting up on stage. Or I could get a super hard question from one of the audience members and it would make me look stupid and I would be embarrassed. Or I guess I also could just bore everyone to death, right? So that's my answers for number two. A lot of fears circling around in there. So number three, how can I crush this fear and replace it with a very positive outcome so I succeed instead of fail? So my answer to that would be, I'm going to rock my presentation because I'm knowledgeable, I'm prepared, I know how to be engaging, and when someone asks a hard question, I'm not even afraid of that because my confidence will be enough to tell them I simply don't know the answer, but that it's an interesting question and I'll think about it more. I will get up on stage and present my material like a sophisticated professional, and I will leave proud. So that's already a lot better than my answer to number two, right? So you're seeing the positivity come in. So number four, what will the positive outcome be? Well, I'm going to walk away from the presentation with no regrets and excitement about my performance. People will thank me at the end for their time, and I will thank them for joining. And at the end, I'm going to have a celebratory dinner with my friends at the conference once it's over so we can cheers to the success of the day, right? So number five, what will I look like when this does happen? Well, I'm going to be well-dressed. I'm going to be relaxed. I will look happy, engaged with my surroundings, other people. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to be poised. And the people around me will be engaged with me as well. And then how will I feel? I'm going to feel really grateful that I got through it and did a great job. I'm going to be excited about the future and secure in the fact that I could just do it over again and I would be totally fine. Okay, so some of you might be sitting there thinking, wow, this sounds a bit arrogant. I get you. I totally get you. But let me say, if there's any time to be a bit arrogant in our own, it's in our own imagination, right? Because here's the thing. No one else is going to be arrogant for you. So when you're imagining and using your imagination, this is the time to really boost yourself up. And I also don't exactly see it as arrogance. It's more self-empowerment, confidence in our own abilities, right? Again, just squashing those fears, getting rid of that negative self-talk, getting rid of the negative what-ifs, getting rid of the what might happen. It might, but it's likely not going to if you don't give it any space in your head, okay? So I promise you, if you try this method out on your very worst fears, even your fears of failure, you're going to start having a major mindset shift. So I've since done numerous public speaking events since that fateful year in 2013 when I was full of the fear of failure, both in person and online, and I've yet to have any of my fears realized. In fact, it's almost always been a best case scenario type of situation. And I actually love this type of work that I do now, and I have really no fears about when it comes to speaking in front of groups. You know, like if something bad happens, okay, but so far nothing has really happened. So my fear was just as much of an imagination as if $1 million were to fall on the stage while I was speaking. You can always focus on that too. Who knows what might happen? So the next time that you're faced with the fear of failure and find it holding you back, really just start analyzing it and then tap into your imagination to reshape your outcome into whatever it is you can imagine. So you have these questions that have come in talking about your fears, and you're going to answer them. First, you're going to analyze your fear. Then After that, you're going to really go through the questions that are going to prompt you towards success, the ones that are going to help you visualize your own success. And this, again, is going to be a really powerful technique. You're going to do it right before you go to sleep. And say you have a big event coming up in a week, do it every single day. See what happens. You're going to be really surprised. Okay, so we've made it to the end of the class, which is great. And I'm going to go ahead and post the link to our worksheet, which is going to help you tackle your own fears, dealing with failure, and help you visualize and realize a much more positive outcome. I'm going to add the link for the worksheet in the comments, and I will also include it in the video description at the end of the class. This worksheet is downloadable and interactive, meaning you can type right into it. And so anytime you find yourself faced with the fear of failure on anything, refer to this worksheet and tap into the power of imagination to revise your fear into success. It also includes a section for those of us who might be a little more prone than others for having a negative attitude or a really pervasive fear of failure. So there's going to be some solid tips in there for you as well. And it includes some bonus info on goal setting, which I hope you'll appreciate. So to access the worksheet, simply click on the link that I'm including today. All right, great. So this is it for this week's Fast Track class on overcoming the fear of failure. I hope this method has already shifted your mindset into realizing that you have control over a lot, including your fears. So when you tap into the power of your own imagination, truly anything is possible, especially your own success. Don't let your fears